We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Gimel Amid Beis in Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 73b. The Gemara says, Rav Mori bar Rachel Moshchen Leahu Nachri Beis, or Rav Mori bar Rachel, so he was owed money by a certain non-Jew, and he took as a mortgage, he took as a collateral from the non-Jew, he took a house. Hadar Zavna l'Rava. Then what happened was that the non-Jew sold this house to Rava. Notar Tresar Yarchishasa. Rav Mori bar Rachel waited for 12 months. He waited for a full year. And then Shakal Agar Besa, then he took the rent that he was supposed to pay for the house. And the Gemara says, Amti le Rava, he brought the rent to Rava. He wanted to pay Rava the rent for the house that he was now living in. Amar Lei said to him, the reason why I didn't bring rent to the master until now, because in general, when you take a collateral like this, it's a full year. And had the non-Jew wanted to remove you from the property, he wouldn't have been able to remove me from the property. But now that the year has passed, the master should take the rent for the house. So Amar Lei, so he said to him, meaning Rava said to Rav Mori bar Rachel, had I known to have a memushkan le lamar, that this house was mortgaged to the master, lo have a zavina no le, I would not have actually bought it. But now kedinayim avdinan lach, I'm going to follow the laws of the non-Jews in this case. Kalemas de lo mesalki bezuzeh, the halacha by the non-Jews. The law by the non-Jews is that as long as they don't pay off the loan, lo shakil agar basis, so then they don't take rent for the property. Meaning to say, in a situation where a non-Jew is the borrower, in a situation in general that involves non-Jews, so if the lender takes the house as a collateral, there's no need whatsoever for the lender to pay rent because there's no issue of ribis. There's no issue of problems of interest when it comes to the courts of the non-Jews. And so therefore, essentially, you're taking a collateral, you're taking this house as a mortgage, and that is the mortgage. You don't have to pay rent on it. It's only in the Jewish law that the lender has to pay rent in order to avoid a problem of ribis. So he said, I'm going to follow their laws. I also, I'm not going to take any rent from you until we remove the obligation over here, meaning until the non-Jew pays back the loan. And Rashi explains, Rav Mori bar Rachel, Rav Mori the son of Rachel, Rashi says, Bas Shmuel have it. This Rachel was actually the daughter of Shmuel, meaning to say, Rav Mori was the son of Rachel, who was a woman. Rachel was the daughter of Shmuel. V'nishbis, and what happened was she was captured. V'nasa nachri, she ended up marrying a non-Jew while she was captured. V'nisgayer, and that non-Jew that she married converted. Ushmei Isser Giora, his name, her husband's name essentially, was Isser Giora, Isser the convert. V'Rav Mori, and with regards to Rav Mori, ho raso shalo b'kedusha. So she became pregnant at the time still where the husband Isser Giora had not yet converted, but by the time he was born, so his father had already converted. Umachmas kevodo, and in order, out of respect for him, talu al shem imo, they name Rav Mori, they say after his mother and not after his father because of this incident. So Hadar Nachri v'Zavna l'Rava. So again, what happened was Rav Mori bar Rachel was on the property because he took it as collateral, and the non-Jew who's the owner of the property, he went ahead and sold the property to Rava, and then Notar Shasa. So Rav Mori waited a year. Himton Rav Mori Shana Shlema. He waited a full year, and then Shakal Agar Besa. Then he took the rent Mishana Haba for the coming year. V'Amti Le Rava. He was going to pay rent to Rava for the coming year, and he explained Hadalo Amtoy Hevesi. Why didn't I bring rent until now? The reason why I did not bring the rent until now is because you have a full year still where you're allowed to be on the property, where the non-Jew can't remove you from the property. Lo Shakilna Agar Besa Ad She'echof Es Hanachri L'Shalem Loch Mosecha. So then Rava responded, now that I found out that really you're the one that holds the mortgage on this property, so therefore I'm not going to take any rent until I force the non-Jew to pay back your money. V'yein zuribis, and it's not going to be a problem of interest, the fact that you're on the property without rent. Because Rava, he's not obligated anything over here. It's not his loan. Elanachri, it's really the non-Jew's loan, and therefore it's not an issue of interest in this case. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rava mi Barnish le Ravashi. Rava from Barnish said to Ravashi, Chazi ma Rabbanon to ka'achli ribisa. See, master, that the Rabbanon, they're consuming ribis, they're taking interest. Why? Do you have izuze achamra b'tishrei? Because they pay money for wine in Tishrei. They give the money early, essentially, that's like a loan. Umivchri la b'teves, and then they select the wine in Teves, and in that way they avoid that it's going to be vinegar. Had they just taken the wine early in Tishrei, so it's possible the wine that they selected would turn to vinegar. By waiting until Teves, they ensure the fact that they're taking the good quality wine, and therefore that's essentially a situation of interest. They're taking the good quality wine in exchange for the fact that they paid early. And so the Gemara continues, Amar Lei said back to him, Inu nami achamra koyahavi, achola lo koyahavi. They also, when they pay the money, they're paying for wine, they're not paying for vinegar. And meikara de chamra chamra de chola chola. And from the beginning already, what is wine was going to be wine, what is vinegar is going to be vinegar. Hahi shaitahu de kamivchri. It's just that at that moment they're selecting the proper wine, meaning to say, when they give the money early, at that point in time they're paying for wine. It just is not known exactly which wine is going to survive, so to speak, and which is going to turn to vinegar. When they wait a few months, that's when they're able to understand that this wine is the good quality wine, which is what they paid for, and they're essentially selecting exactly what they paid for, and therefore it is not a problem of ribis. And Rashi explains, Umivchri le beteves, again, they select the wine in teves, notlin yayin tov, they take good wine, v'yavashakli le mitishrei. Now, had they taken the wine in Tishrei, dil mahavim machmitz, it might have spoiled, it might have turned to vinegar, v'eshtakach demishum da'akdimu mos betishrei, and it turns out, since they gave the money early in Tishrei, v'adayin lo yatsa hashar, the market price is still not publicized, kibel olav hamocher achrayis, essentially it's the seller over here that's taking upon himself responsibility. And so the response was, meikara mishah shalacho, really, from the time that he actually bought it, the chamra chamra, the chala chala. Whatever was wine, whatever was vinegar already. Meaning, kilkulo besochu, if it was going to be ruined, that was already happening at that time. Elash eno nikr, just wasn't clear that it was going to be ruined. We don't realize that, but it was happening at the beginning. V'yayin hamakulka lo lokachimenu, he certainly didn't buy spoiled wine, and therefore this is not a problem of ribis. And the Gemara continues, Ravina havayoiv zuze livnei akra de shenvasa. Ravina gave money, meaning he gave money in advance to the people who lived by the fortress, which was at the river Shenvasa. V'shavchi leitfei kufisa. And so then they gave him a little bit extra wine. When they actually delivered the wine, they gave him a little extra. Asa lakame de Ravashi, came before Ravashi. Amarle said to him, Mishari, is this permitted if they're giving me a little extra? Plus I paid in advance. Maybe that's a problem of interest. Amarle said to him, yes, it's okay. They're just forgiving it to you. They're being mochel it to you. And the reason why they're doing it is they want to have a good business relationship with you. It's not considered to be a problem of ribis. Amarle, but he said to him, Ha'ara lav didhui, but the truth is, this land is not really theirs. The reason why the land was not really theirs was because they had taken the land because the true owners had not paid the tax. So Amarle, he said back to him, Ara lataska mishabda, the truth is that the land is essentially mishubed for those who pay the taxes. Umalko Amar, and the king says, Mandayoiv taska lechol ara, the one who pays the tax can have the land, and so therefore it is considered legitimate, the land that they have. And Rashi explains, Livnei akra de Shenvasa, Shenvasa Shem Hanar, Shenvasa refers to the name of the river, Akra Kuntaria Bilaz, again that refers to this fortress. Yoshvim al Svas Oso Nar, essentially they dwelled at the banks of this particular river, that's the idea. V'yoivlu Ravina Zuze Lifnei HaBatzir, now Ravina paid them the money in advance of the harvest, Lases Lo Yain Bois HaBatzir, and then they were going to give wine at the time of the harvest, Kashar Hayotze, according going by the market price. V'shavchi leitfei kufisen, they poured for him an extra jug. Midaitam shalom b'tanai, they just did it on their own. That was not part of the condition. And so he said, Achuli kamachli gabach, they're really just forgiving it to you. They're giving it to you as a gift. Hoel v'lo pasakti imam, since that wasn't part of the arrangement. Umidaitam nostam lach, and they're just doing this on their own. Ve'in mazkirim lomar b'schar mosecha shayu b'telos etzlenu. They're not saying we're doing it because you advanced us the money. So matana bi'almahi, it's just considered to be a gift. And then the Gemara says that he said, V'ha'ara lav didhui, but the problem is it's not really their land. Ela shahayu ashirim v'rom b'nei adam sheinichu sadoseim uvarch. What happened was these were wealthy people who saw other people flee the land, v'yein nosnem masakarka l'melech, because they weren't able to pay the tax of the king, v'heim not l'masadas v'hakramim, and so these wealthy people, they took over the fields and the vineyards, uporin mas l'melech, and they did pay the tax to the king, v'shem hayayin shani lokeach mehem gezel hu biyadi, so he was concerned maybe the wine that I have from them, maybe it's considered stealing. The karka ain't an exelis, because land is not considered stolen, meaning to say, it's not that they make a kinyan when they steal it, you can't really steal karka, and so therefore it's not really theirs. V'harei shel ba'ilim u'peiros gezel, therefore it really belongs to the original owner, and the produce is essentially stolen. Maybe I can't have this produce, I can't have this wine. And so he said, Taska is mas shel karka. Again, there's a land tax, and essentially there's a lien for the purposes of this tax, and if they don't pay the tax, the king is allowed to give it to someone else. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rav Papa l'Rava, Rav Papa said to Rava, Chazi mar hani rabbanon, see master, these rabbanon, the yahavi zuzi akarga de inshi, they pay taxes on behalf of other people who weren't paying, umeshavdi butzvei, and then as payment they make them work for them more than really what they paid. They're essentially overworking them just because they pay the tax on their behalf. Amar Lei said to him, Hashta ichu shechiva lo amri lechu hamilsi. He said back to him, now if I had died at this point in time, I wouldn't be able to tell you what I'm about to say. Hachi Amar Rav Sheshes, this is what Rav Sheshes says, Moharkayu dahani betafsa de malka monach. The fact that these people are in servitude, really that everybody's in servitude, has to do with the tax. Everybody essentially is like a servant to the king. Umalka Amar, the king says, Mandalo yoev karga, if somebody doesn't pay the tax, lishtabid, lemanda yoev karga has to work for somebody who does pay the tax, and therefore this essentially is all following the rules of the king, the rules of the government, and it's not a problem to make them work for you if you pay the tax on their behalf. And Rashi explains, karga refers to kesef gulgalta, that's essentially the head tax. It's not a land tax, but it's a tax that's paid per person. Yehudim kalecha nosin kesef gulgaloso lemelech. Everyone from all the Jews, each one has to pay a certain tax to the king. And so he said mohar kayu, which means chosam avda shalahem, the signet that they are slaves, the fact that they are slaves to the king. Where's that place? That's betafsa. Ba'argas shel melech munach. That's essentially in the treasury of the king. The king essentially, all of the people are subjects to the king. Vare kulam avodim lo. Everybody's an eved to the king. The dina de malchus adina. What he was essentially saying was that the law of the land is considered the law. And the Gemara continues, Rav Seuram achua de Rava have. Rav Seuram was the brother of Rava. Takif inshi de lo malu. He would seize people who were not acting properly. Uma'ayilahu beguharka de Rava. And he made them, they had to pull the wagon which Rava rode in. Amar le Rava said to him, Shaper kavarat, what you're doing is actually correct. You're allowed to make these people do this kind of service if they're not acting properly. The Tanina, because it was taught, Reisa she'eno noe kashur, if you see that somebody's not acting properly, minayin shata rashay leshtabid, but from where do we know that you're allowed to enslave such a person? Talmud over the pasuk says, Liolam bohem tavodu, it says you can enslave them. Now the pasuk really is referring to the Eved Kanani, but in the next word it says, Uvi achechem, and with your brethren, and really means to say that you're not supposed to enslave your brethren, but we can read the pasuk as liolam behem ta'avodu uvi achechem. Sometimes there are situations where you can enslave your brother. Yachol afilo noe kashur. Now I might think even if the person is acting properly, biachechem, that you're allowed to make your brother do this kind of service. But Talmud Omer, the pasuk says uvi achechem b'nei Yisrael ish biachi v'gomer, that you're not allowed to rule over your brothers. This only applies to somebody who's not acting properly. And Rashi says, Takif kofa, essentially he coerced them. Guharka is the agolo muchenes lemerkeves adam. The guharka is this wagon that was made for riding people around in. Bohem tavodu uviachechem nami tavodu. It says that you have them serve, and also your brothers, they also sometimes have to serve, again in situations where they're not acting properly. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Chama says, Haiman de yoev zuze lechavre lemizvan lechamra. If a person gives money to his friend, that person is supposed to be an agent, he's supposed to be a shliach, to purchase wine for him. Upasha velo zavinle, and then the agent, he's neglectful, and he doesn't buy what he's supposed to buy. So mishalim le kedeka'azla farvosa dezul shafat. So he has to buy him wine. He essentially took the money in order to buy wine. So he's going to have to buy that wine that he said he was going to buy, and he'll have to buy it according to the market rate that is found in this area, Zul Shafat, meaning to say even if the price has gone up for wine, he's going to have to buy the wine and it's going to be incurred, the expense will be incurred by him, he'll have to pay even a higher amount than he was given. And so the Gemara says, Amar Ameimar says, Amrisa l'shmaita kamid Rav Zvid min Ardoi. I said this over in front of Rav Zvid from Ardoi. Amar, he said, Ki ka'amar Rav Chama, when did Rav Chama say that the agent has to buy this person the wine, even if the wine is not more expensive? Hani mili biyayin stam. That's only in a situation where he was given the money to buy wine in general. Aval biyayin zeh, but let's say he was given the money in order to buy specific wine. So there we don't say that, because mi yemar demezavni leinahile. Who says that the person that he goes to in order to buy the wine, maybe the seller won't sell it to him? If there was very specific wine he had to buy, it's possible that it's out of his control. Maybe the agent could not have gotten that wine because maybe the seller would not have sold it, and so therefore it's not considered the agent's fault in a situation of yayin zeh. And the Gemara continues, Rav Ashi says, Afilu yayin stam namilo. Even if he says take this money and buy wine in general, even that is not something that the agent has to do. Let's say the agent neglects to buy the wine. My time, and what's the reason? Asmachta, because this is considered to be essentially an asmachta. The asmachta lo kanyan, and asmachta is not considered to be a good kinyan. Rashi here explains, Afarvosa de Zulshafat, you have to follow the market price of Zulshafat, Shema Mokum, Shayayin Nikach, Vinimkar L'Sham L'Rov. That's just the area where wine, the majority of wine is bought and sold over there. Haloch and Yayin Bimos HaBatzer, when people buy wine at the time of the harvest, that's where they buy, so you have to follow that market price. And so Rav Ashi said, even by Yayin Stam, it's considered an Asmachtahi, it's considered an Asmachta, meaning, Afilu Ifticho V'Yamar, even if he guaranteed him, and he told him, Eini Kona Lach, he says, if I don't buy it for you, Ephraim Mishali, then I'll pay with my own money to make sure you get it. Let's say the agent even said that. Einzu ela asmachta, that's just considered asmachta, hoel velo kanu miyado, since they didn't actually make a kinyan to that effect. It was essentially just a promise that the person made, if such and such happens, then I will do that. That's considered to be in general an asmachta. Asmachta is not binding, and he's not obligated to follow through. And so the Gemara continues, according to Rav Ashi, what's the difference between this case and the case of the following Mishnah? Meaning to say, Rav Ashi is saying this is considered an asmachta. If the person says, if I don't buy the wine from you, then I'll even be willing to pay my own money to make sure I get you the wine, that's just considered an asmachta. But what about the following Mishnah? Let's say you have a sharecropper, and the sharecropper says, im over velo avid, let's say I let the land lay fallow, and I don't work the land like I said, so Ashalim b'meitva, so I'm going to pay you the best produce. So there we say that in such a situation, he is obligated to pay the produce. We don't say it's an asmachta. And so the Gemara answers, Hasam over there, it's different because biyado, because it's really in his control, and therefore it is considered that he's obligating himself. Rashi explains him over lach v'lo avid, again, if I let the land lay fallow, I don't do the proper work. Gabe mekabel sada mechaver. This is talking about a case where a person, again, is like a sharecropper on a field. Lemechza, he's going to give half the produce to the owner. V'hovira shelo charsha v'lo zara, and then he lets it lay. He doesn't plow it. He doesn't plant it. Shamano sa kama haisa ru'uya lasa. So what we do is we evaluate how much it would have produced. V'nosein lo, and he gives him that amount. Shekach kasav lo mitchila, because that's really what he wrote him in the first place. He said, "Em over v'chulo. If I don't work the land properly, then I'm going to pay you." But Parak HaMakabel, that's in Parak HaMakabel. Alma kevan de'afsadei b'hachi v'lo samach. So we say that in this situation, since he made him lose, lav asmachtai. That's not considered to be an asmachta. She'eno makabel olav ela kadei hafsed shefsido, because essentially he's really accepting upon himself to pay for the loss which he causes. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Dalid Amud Aleph.